Welcome to the show. Today in Hamilton Week, we are discussing the 2020 film adaptation, Hamilton. With us today is our sister, Andrea Gomes. Thank you for joining us, Andrea.
Hey, thank you for having me today.
Nice. Hamilton the musical is directed by Thomas Kail, but adapted for the screen. Originally written by LinManuel Miranda, who wrote the book and the score for the musical and stars as Hamilton. Think about that for a moment. I can't think of anybody who's done something like this. Even very talented people don't do that. But he did it. And you could talk, we could just talk a while just about him. I'll say this too, because we're going to talk about his talent, of course, as a singer, as an actor and things. But I want to remind the viewer, and I want to ask you, Andrea, what you like most about this musical. But this is adapted from the book by Ron Chernow. And I want to just show everybody this book because it is a phenomenal achievement. Look how thick this is to adapt this it's historical to a musical. And I went in I don't know if I was suspicious, but I was curious, I guess, how he would do it. This alone is an achievement to get the important details from this book. And he got them in there. Of course, not everything you can't, but wow, did he get a lot of important facts in there, and in a very well told story musically. I want to say before asking you, Andrea, what you liked about this the most, I actually thought, I don't know how you guys feel, but I thought it was a brilliant idea to cast African-American actors in many of these parts. Yeah. As a teacher, I think, how do we get students, how do we get Latinos and African-Americans to care about the white founding fathers who walked around in powdered wigs and it was a different world? How do we get them to care about these very critical ideas that are in this book and in the Federalist Papers? That was the only knowledge I had of Alexander Hamilton is through his Federalist Papers, which we reviewed this week. You might want to check out that video. But I thought it was brilliant. I really loved the talk, the my shot, which is the allusion. I want to take my shot. I don't want to throw away my shot. The allusion to his final days, Alexander Hamilton. Wow, that was really good. There's a lot I could say, but tell us, Andrea, what do you think?
So I think you hit on I love the fact that there were African Americans, and not just African Americans, all different cultures representing the play. And I think his idea to do that was amazing in the sense that it brings, my kids and other kids, and they see like just the theatrical aspect of it. Like, I could do that. I could sing. I could be on Broadway. I could do this stuff, not just about what the play was about, but it just brings out, you do see a lot. He could have done the whole, white men in wigs kind of a thing, but I don't think it would have brought as big of an impact as it did to.
I think even your children, like CJ, was affected by even the score, the music, the rap. And why? Because he went in that direction, right?
Right. He went with the rap. He went with music that it wasn't like my kids learned a very valuable history lesson through Hamilton. And CJ loves history. So he loved the aspect of him being in the militia and then him fighting, even the duel and all this kind of stuff. So my son was that brought it even more to him. And then the music on top of it, the rapping and the singing, it wasn't just ballads, and it wasn't just, those 2 hours just go by so quick, and they're singing the songs and they're learning, what are the Federalist Papers? And they're going to find out. And And then you end up, well, what more was there to Alexander Hamilton than just this play? So it makes you dive in deeper to who he was. Like he started the Coast Guard, and he did other things in his life than just what we saw in Hamilton. So yeah, I loved it. I loved.
What was your
that
favorite
aspect of it.
song though? I mean, Ruben brought one shot, but I had a few songs I really enjoyed. Is it hard to pick one or?
It's
two?
hard to pick one because there's so many, but I love when the sisters sing. Mm-hmm. So anything that the sisters sing that I love, and honestly, one of my favorite characters in the whole Hamilton is the King. He is amazing, but he's so talented. I mean, he's done so much in his own personal life. He's been on Broadway and TV and all those kind of things. So just his bringing that humor. So, it's a very serious story, but you're bringing that humor into it, and it just makes you like, oh my gosh, this King was just so ridiculous in his wanting to rule, so.
Right. I mean, share with you, I put some notes on myself. I guess his name is Jonathan Groff. Yes. And as you shared, he's done quite a bit. There's a scene though, when he comes out, I think it's the second time he comes out, and he goes, okay, we lost, and let's see how you guys are going to do by as you lead,
Right.
And it's so true. I mean, I think that's what's one great thing about this musical, and even the book Ruben and I will review later on this week, that you know what? It's difficult to lead. It's difficult. I'm sorry, we've already reviewed it. I apologize. And so that being said, Ruben, Andrea, I mean, it brings it to light that, our independence, the revolution that happened between the United States and England, there was a cost, and it was real. Real people died. Real people got involved. Real people led. People like a Hamilton, who was born who was basically not, he became an orphan.
Became an orphan, yeah.
And he lived in, the Caribbean, he's a real first American, to get the American dream, right? He's the first immigrant to come here and to make something of himself. I think he is the immigrant. I mean, he is America in a way, in my mind.
Yeah.
And I think Lin Miranda, I think he did that. LinManuel Miranda, I think he did a great job doing that. You guys talked about how it was great to choose different, cultures to be these actors and so forth. I have a friend who saw it and he didn't like it. He didn't like that part. But I remind him, you know what? Hamilton was called a Creole by John Adams and others.
Oh yeah.
He was treated that way, and it was so brilliant by LinManuel Miranda to do that. To say, you know what, I'm going to go there because that's how he was treated, and that's how in a lot of people's eyes he was, and back then that was horrific. Even though we could go into Jefferson and his liaisons, but. So, well, I mean, I had a couple of songs I really loved too. One of them had to do with Elizabeth Eliza, where she burns his letters,
Oh, yeah.
And in real life, and she does it later in life, but it's so powerful because she's hurt. She's given her life to him. Later on, she lives, 50 years after him. And she is the number one person who backed him up her entire life. She was, people wanted to dismiss him, and she was always speaking up. She was always saying something. She was always supportive. She is she's an awesome wife, awesome character. I'm sorry, Ruben, you were going to say something about her? Oh, no, okay. So that being said, that song was one of my favorites. But another one was, besides My Shot, was when Aaron Burr and John Adams are talking to their children, right? They're writing a letter to their children.
Oh, yeah.
Philip and I forget the daughter's name of Theodosia.
Yes.
Burr's daughter. Yeah. And they're writing to him. It's so sweet and so beautiful. And in a way, I started thinking, this musical is also part of, I felt like it gave Burr a humanity. Even though he did what he did, you could just tell he was in a company of Hamilton. He just couldn't be, he didn't have that charisma, he didn't have that character, but he wanted it. He wanted to be like that. And in real life, that's pretty much what it was. And Burr was always in his footsteps. And I do want
to point out, now that you mentioned Burr, I want to connect it to what Andrea said about the rap, and how she liked, and it's the Burr character at one point sings that that death doesn't discriminate between sinners and the saints, which foretold what was going to happen between them, right?
Yeah.
I guess the idea is Hamilton is the saint, Burr is the sinner, possibly, but also there was this idea or suggestion that Burr was immensely jealous. I didn't get that as much from the book.
Yeah.
But when I'm watching the musical, it really dawned on me that was very possible. And so I say this because what the musical did very well is that it showed a Hamilton that worked very hard, especially at the beginning. He was reading constantly, which is what he was about. So back to the idea of the rap, LinManuel Miranda mentioned, I don't know if you know the story, but the song My Shot took him over a year to write, and he kept revising because he said he did it in the spirit of Hamilton. And so some of these most successful founders are hard workers. They're not just talented. Burr would say, you talk too much and this and that. He was just sort of dismissing him, but these guys worked hard to get what they did, to achieve what they did. So
yeah,
I think that's a pretty good lesson too for your, for your children.
Right. Well, he had to, it says, talk less, smile more.
Yeah.
But Hamilton had to, he had to talk more to get to where he wanted to be, and that's just, yeah.
He had more to work for, where Burr came from he was brought up in a good home.
Right.
Money was no obstacle.
Privileged. Yeah.
It was privileged life, where Hamilton didn't have that. He just kept, and he always had to fight that, remember, remind himself that, hey, I came from that, but I got to keep working hard to move forward. So
yeah, for sure.
Very good.
What about the number between? It was almost like a standoff between Jefferson and Hamilton.
When I
saw that, I thought this is the modern Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah.
Because it's very entertaining, and it's talking about something very critical. By the way, it's pointing out the difficulty Hamilton had in your balancing this idea of the rule of law and freedom, which is a real delicate balance, because Jefferson was trying to make him look bad in the musical, but hey, wait a minute, there's a lot to this. What was your take on that one?
Well, I want to say something real quick. Go ahead.
They had two standoffs.
They did, and I do want to make mention of it because I'm a history guy and I love this kind of stuff. But it's part of the book and part of the musical that maybe people might consider part of the weeds. I mean, because it's dealing with policy, but the way they deal with policy is creative. They're doing, like you said, Ruben, they're doing these standoffs right against each other and the rapping, and so because of that, I just felt it was so ingenious of the director, right, to do this. And so, like you said, we did it twice. So I just thought that was fascinating. That's how they decided to handle some really intricate pieces, and they did it well. Go ahead, Andrea. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. I would just have to agree with that. With what I can't add to what both of you said, but it was, a good part of it.
It's the reason why I make note of I'm going to talk about the second one right now, but. By the way, this musical, I think, could benefit from multiple viewings because the lyrics fly out so fast.
Yes.
I missed some of it. So I've only seen it once. I saw it this week. I go, I know I'm missing a lot here. Because this is a man of ideas, right? Hamilton was. And one of them, it's still relevant today, the idea of how do you walk the line between how do you achieve not despotism or anarchy? How do you go in the middle? That is really difficult. And Hamilton, it was a lifelong struggle for Hamilton. And I just love how they handled it in that little square off. The second square off, though, I'm going to throw a flag on Hamilton. In a way, it's real tricky here because they argued over the revolution, over France, the French Revolution. And what I really love about Hamilton and the book and they touched on it here in the musical is that Hamilton was very critical of the French Revolution as he should be, or as he should have been. But Jefferson loved it, which is a problem for Jefferson because it was a bloody revolution and it was in many ways wrong. Hamilton called him on it, but I believe that Hamilton was too hard on France. And you know what? And we talked about it in the book review But the thing is that France died. French soldiers died in America for the revolution. And Hamilton points out, hey, they did it for their own interests. They wanted to weaken England. Hey, but people died. Sure, every country goes in for their own interests, but they also help. Our country has gone in for our own interests as well, but we've also done the right thing. So I just wanted to point out that I think Hamilton was a bit too hard on France.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I think he would argue, though, that, you know what, we're a young country and we're just getting our, boots on, and if we get into this struggle, we're going to be decimated. I'm not sure if that's a good enough argument, but I think he would say that.
He was right, though.
I think they even kind of like get on that in the musical, as they talk about, like, hey, we're just starting out.
Yeah, I think Washington says that. Yeah.
The compromise was, I don't disagree with the compromise, which is let's be neutral. We couldn't get into a war. Right. I just wanted to point that out. But it's a great philosophical argument they're having within this duel, mediated by Washington. I mean, it's just wildly creative. Again, you said your children have watched this, Andrea, and they got something out of it. It says a lot about this director and writer.
And writer,
of this show.
Yeah.
Now, do you have anything, Andrea, that you say, hey, I wish this would have been a little different? Because there's a lot of positives, obviously. I think, of course, the cast, not only the cast, but the scenery, the stage, the way it moved, it was so awesome. But is there anything that you think, hey, they could have done a little less of this? Or...
Well, it's funny because when we talked on the phone, and I did tell you, and I hate to say it because he's so good. LinManuel is such an amazing writer and creator and actor. I think he's a wonderful actor, but to star in your own everything, I just felt like, okay, I felt like, to me, it was just a little bit too much.
I think that's fair.
I think they could have found someone to play that role who could have maybe commanded it a little bit more. I felt like, he was, I don't know, I just felt, and that's my own personal thinking in it, just from watching and listening. And
the only reason I'd agree with you on that is because I've actually got to see it on stage, and it was a different actor. And I felt like he brought a little bit more to it. Singing chops and just his whole manner. I mean, not that LinManuel was terrible, but he was, he had so much more he was doing in that play, right? I hear you. What do you think about that, Ru?
I totally agree. In fact, when I watched it, I thought this is a credible performance. It works okay, but your interests are divided. When you're putting this much time into the production of this show, that is one thing. Just do that well and cast the best actor as you can, who can fulfill the other duties, because there's 10 actors who could do that.
Right. And just him in comparison, just his vocals. I think it's just his vocals for me to hear like Washington sing and Lafayette and all these different actors sing. The bar was so high that he just didn't quite meet that bar for me. But I mean, needless to say, he's talented. And I mean, in the middle of acts or in the middle of rehearsals, he's writing Moana. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and so that came out like right after, he did Hamilton came out. So, I mean, he's just so talented and but I would have loved to have seen maybe someone else portray that role. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. It makes you also, though, think this guy's still young and he's going to hopefully produce more stuff, right? More plays and so forth. And you're like, oh, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Because he's so passionate. Yeah. But no, that's
great. There's another great scene I thought we should talk about, and that was the compromise scene. Yes. Follow the money and see where it goes. It is a really important aspect of the revolution and the build up to this compromise, because Hamilton had a real strong idea about the banking system, but the South still didn't trust that. And for Hamilton and Jefferson to come together on that, the way they did, I could see people looking at that scene because it was so well done. Yeah. That how the line is, but nobody was in the room, or
right?
Nobody was in the room, and And it was great. It's very clever how Burr comes around and says, "What do I want?" Because Hamilton goes, "Who are you?" And that's part of the conflict between these two characters in the book and in the musical. Is Hamilton accuses Burr, and we got to talk about how it ends for Hamilton. That has to be our next question. But Hamilton is consistently, from the beginning to the end, accusing Burr of not having principles. And so Hamilton at one point goes, "What do you want?" And Burr says, "I just want to be in the room." Very clever.
Yeah.
So I could see people watching that scene and saying, "I want to know what really happened. What do they mean? I want to go deep into this compromise and see what the contribution of Jefferson and Hamilton are." So what do you guys think of that?
It was great just knowing what the compromise was, which was to get Jefferson wanted DC to be where it's at now, and Hamilton wanted to buy up. At that point, it was to get the central bank going, right, and also buy up the debt.
He also wanted, he wanted the central government to incur the debt of the state,
all the state debt,
pay them,
to make it one instead of 13 states doing it, just have one.
Yeah, he was interested in the union, right, and bringing the union together and not continually having these states bicker. Well, they owe more than we do. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You saw a little bit in the play, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't, unless you dive deeper into it, you don't really know what it is, but they had to do something.
They had a compromise there somehow.
They had to compromise something, yeah.
Right, and that was my point. That was the point I was trying to make. Maybe I wasn't clear. Is that I could see people watching that scene and being piqued in their interest. Like, let me look at this compromise. What was it? And you can learn a lot about these men and those regions, by looking.
These are two men who are big advocates. They were not friends, and became the first political parties, right?
You mean adversaries?
I'm sorry, adversaries. What did I say? Advocates? I'm sorry, adversaries. You have the Democrat Republicans versus the Federalists by Hamilton, right? And that was the beginning of what we have now, really, of these two parties. And people think that today it's pretty nasty. It was really nasty back then, the way they talked to each other, the way they wrote about each other in newspapers and so forth. So,
I mean, just the fact that they wanted to expose him for thinking that he was misappropriating money.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, they were willing to ruin his life over these, this information that they had.
Right.
And he had to be like, well, he had to show his hand because,
In a way, he didn't have to, but he did had integrity. So, you know what? I blew it with my wife.
Yes.
But I did not blow it with the country. I did not, do what you're saying, which is, they were accusing him of sharing information, right? Inside secrets, speculation to Reynolds. And so he goes, I didn't do that. But I messed up on my marriage.
Which is kind of crazy because that just shows where his loyalties really were, with his country.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
And he also knew history's going to remember it. Are they going to remember the scoundrel who gave, who was not somebody to be trusted with the central bank and with the central government, or and in time, I think people maybe forgive him for what he did to his wife. Although I think you could argue he was true to her from there on, but still, that's probably the reason why he didn't become president, because of that one.
Well, it's her call. Who's to forgive him, and she forgave him.
She did.
I will say too. Yeah, go on.
No, I'll say, and she became his biggest advocate, right? I'll use that. I use it perfectly there.
I will say too that at one point, and I want to go to the final escalation soon, but I will say that several times, including this scene we were just discussing, Jefferson points out about Hamilton. Hey, well, you got Washington, behind you. Anybody would do well with Washington backing you up. But there's a reason why everybody's respecting Washington. And this is another great example of, I could see people saying, who is this Washington guy? Why is he so successful? There's hints of it in the Hamilton biography, but to me, and this is just my opinion, but as much as I respect Hamilton and Jefferson, the only real adults in the room among the founding fathers are Washington and Ben Franklin. I mean, these guys were geniuses. They seem to be above reproach. But to me, man, Jefferson's hands are so dirty. And of course, Hamilton as well, and at times.
I would say more Washington than Benjamin Franklin, but I don't want to get into that right now. But definitely Washington was just a stud, just by him leaving after 8 years, and it shows in the musical where he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna leave," and Hamilton's like, "What? Right? We're in power. What are you doing? No one, even the king's like, well, I guess he's leaving. What? I guess that's what they're gonna do in the United. They're gonna leave. People are gonna leave power. No one does at that time. No one did it. We were the first nation to do it, and Washington's one of the most respected presidents because he went home, and that was powerful. That was a cool scene. But yeah, I think Ruben, he was definitely the adult in the room, especially when those boys were squabbling with each other all the time.
Right.
Okay, I don't know what you have against Ben Franklin, but that's definitely for another day.
That is for another day. I got my list.
You're crazy,
but he's good. No, he I have a lot of positives about Ben Franklin too, but he's definitely not one of my faves.
Okay. The death of Philip, how did you think it was handled, Andrea?
That's hard. That's a hard one. It was, I mean, he just wanted his son to have integrity and not to have blood on his hands and just not have that death. And in return, it just backfired on him. You know, he lost his son. And it's a hard scene. And it's, you know, as a mom to see, you know, anything happen to your kids, just, you feel it. The way they portrayed it in the musical you can feel that.
It's kind of like a foreshadowing too, right? Of his dad. I mean, I think they use the same guns. He died at the same place.
Yeah.
Like 3 years apart. It's oh man. But that was a cool scene though. And the mother was just, I mean, she found out her husband just cheated on her, and now she's dealing with the death of her son.
And I don't think Hamilton, I feel like I don't know if he could have stopped it, but like, why? Because they were talking crap about me, you know what I mean? Like, really? Like, come on. Like, I don't feel like it was maybe back then it was a reason, but I think it could have been handled differently.
What handled differently?
The duel?
The duel.
Well, I think
because he asked him, like, did you work it out? And I feel like maybe figuring out how to what's the word, like, just come together instead of dueling. Maybe they just hadn't worked it out enough.
Maybe talk it out or something.
Talk it out, yeah.
To me, it is a critical blunder by Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It not only, plot spoiler in a sense, how I feel about Hamilton's final death, or finality, I should say, is that it started with the death of Philip and how his terrible advice, throw the gun, you know, throw away your shots, throw away the gun. No, you don't. Don't do a duel then.
Right. Right.
I mean,
that's my thing. You know, you don't, if you're going to do a duel, you're going to duel. Like, give yourself, he gave him no chance. He sent him out to slaughter almost, you know, that's how it felt. Yeah.
It was a big mistake. Portrayed in the musical very well.
Yeah.
Very emotional. Definitely. And then you have the parallel lives of Aaron Burr and Hamilton finally meeting up at the end. Bad blood. I have really mixed feelings. I feel a little bit sorry for Aaron Burr. Now, I'm also going by the books, by some of the information. I feel a little sorry for him because he heard some nasty words from Hamilton over the years, and a lot of backbiting. Not total, well, yeah, personal about Burr's personal defects.
Yeah.
Finally, the duel, and it ends in death for Hamilton. Were you sad for Alexander Hamilton?
I mean, I think he could have done so much more. You know what I mean? Like, of course, anyone can do much more in their life. I feel, you know, the whole thing is tragic, of course. You know, you don't want that to happen. And I think even Eliza says, like, there was so much more that you could have done. And then she tries to, you know, continue his legacy. So, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, part of me thinks that, you know, he kind of lived his life he lived his life in a way that he knew was going to be short. In a way, he always was writing, and he produced more than any other founding father in regarding documents. But was it short? I could imagine all the other wonderful things that he could. I mean, I don't want to get into the book right now that we reviewed, but definitely he had some ideas.
Right.
And what could have been, you know, definitely a life cut short, and our loss. You know, and thank God for his wife.
At the end, they're just, all of them are saying like, oh, like this was good and this was good, and what he did here was, you know, they all realized, well, after he's gone, oh, wait a minute, it wasn't as bad as we really thought it was.
Right, Jeffrey was investigated. What if I find some dirt? And in the end, you saw like, yeah, I tried to find dirt, and this guy was clean as a whistle.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and his dalliance with the woman, it looked like a setup. And so was it a mistake? Of course it was, but I think it's really asking a lot for, I'll tell you where I think Hamilton went wrong, but I'm not saying I think it's asking a lot for a figure that's that powerful to be completely pure, to say, oh, if you foul, you don't deserve to be forgiven. However, he was a person who really spoke about his own virtue, or he mentioned his virtue. So he kind of got bit by that. Sometimes he wasn't so humble. So there is that. Well, any last words on Hamilton, the musical?
Well, I mean, just from my perspective, my kids love it. I know my niece was so into it. And I love that it opens up a conversation for me to have with my kids. It opens up something that we could have in common. One is music, and then two, history. We get to dive in deeper. So whatever questions they have, you know, well, let's go find out. Let's go read about it. Let's go, you know, and Hamilton wasn't, you know, he had this, he wasn't the most, you don't always hear about Hamilton, right? You hear about Jefferson, and you hear about Franklin, and you hear about Washington and all these other people. You don't always hear about Hamilton. So it just brought him to a different light for us.
Oh yeah. And I think Ron Chernow was the best benefactor of it. I don't think he thought his book was going to be a musical.
No.
And he was blown away. He was like, what? Okay. And then when he saw it, he appreciated it. But also, you know what? This musical saved Hamilton from the $10 bill. He was about to be taken off.
Oh, wow.
Nobody knew Hamilton until the musical. And now they're like, yeah, we can't take him off. We're going to take out Jackson for the 20, but we're not going to take out Hamilton. So thank God for LinManuel.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, LinManuel Miranda. For what you accomplished. There's something to be said about the great writers and the great artists. It's not the politicians that save the day. If you look through history, it often is the writers. And when I say this, I also mention Charles Dickens. I'm just to give you an example of what I mean is they look at him as the reason why debtor prisons went away, why child labor laws were changed, because of the novels of Charles Dickens. But he's one of many artists. And now we can look at this guy, this writer, as somebody who helped resurrect the legacy of Alexander Hamilton. So thank you, Andrea, for joining us. We really
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yep.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time, everybody. We hope you enjoyed Hamilton Week. Bye-bye.